A very warm welcome to the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show. And today's show is, ladies and gentlemen, come here. There's more, which captures the life of one of the UK's finest comedy treasures, which includes 4 television series, not surprisingly called And There's More on Central Television, his own BBC Radio 2 show called Jimmy's Cricket Team, also featuring on the Crankies Club alongside the Crankies and Bobby Davro, and not forgetting the 1984 Royal Variety Show at the London Victoria Palace Theatre in the presence of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, King Charles III, of course, then Prince Charles, and Diana, the Princess of Wales. He is still performing today with over 50 years in show business. Yes, folks, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome on the show Jimmy Cricket. Welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Thank you, Russell. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all mine. It's a bit of an intro, that, wasn't it? I mean, worth it. I mean, your life.
Very, very good. I thought you were talking about somebody else for a minute.
No, it's definitely Jimmy Cricket, Jimmy. That's no doubt whatsoever. I mean, you were born as James Mulgrew in 1945 in Cookstown, Northern Ireland. What was your childhood like? And I also understand your parents were thespians too, that you found out about later in life.
Yes, they met at an amateur dramatics play. I only found out this over the last 6 or 9 months because I've got a remaining sibling. Sadly, I've got 2 brothers and a sister that have predeceased me because I was the younger in the family, but I've still got a brother, Brian, who lives up in Blantyre in Glasgow.
Wow.
And he informed me that, because I never thought there was an ounce of showbiz blood in the family, to be honest with you, Russell, because my dad, his main occupation was an undertaker, would you believe?
Really?
Yeah, that was one of his many occupations. He owned a pub as well.
Oh, that's good.
And he was a bit of an auctioneer, and he drove a taxi. So was there time for anything else? You know?
Oh, that can't be. That's a jack of all trades. That's quite yeah. Something, isn't it? What a brother.
Yeah, it was amazing. Of course, the big thing for my childhood was at 2 years old, we up sticks and left the sleepy town of Cookstown to go to the bustling city of Belfast.
Wow.
At 2. So we bought a corner shop, would you believe? And that would have been 1947. But I think in hindsight, that was a great move, Russell, in that Belfast boasted 2 big theatres, the Grand Opera House and the Empire, as well as a whole loads and loads of cinemas. But that I was able then to see some of the shows in the late 40s and early 50s, which really turned me on to a life in showbiz, treading the boards, watching these great shows, educating Archie, would you believe?
Oh,
Archie Andrews, which was a famous radio series then everybody listened to. Of course, the radio was the big thing then, Russell. And when people would listen to their favourite stars on the radio, Max Bygraves, Lonnie Donegan, David Whitfield, they would all queue up to see what they looked like, Arthur Askey and David Nixon, everybody like that.
Big names
so
there.
that was a great, being within the 2 theatres and being able to go there, I think you catch the bug, basically.
And the bug you did indeed catch, that's for sure. And you left school, I believe, Jimmy, at 16 years of age. A lot of people used to leave school at 15 or 14, I think, didn't they? But you left school at 16, I believe.
I think the year actually went on while I was there.
Oh, that explains that one.
Yeah.
Oh, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
For me, it probably was. I took it as it flowed.
Yes,
really. I was a bit of an underachiever. As I say in my autobiography, my book, I say the only thing I really learned to do was juggle with 3 balls, actually.
Well, that's a great skill in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Call yourself an underachiever because we've all got good qualities, haven't we, in ourselves? It's just finding the one that we're good at. And you did, of course. And you left school at 16 and worked for the next 2 years, I understand, in a betting shop. So a bit like your brother, doing different things, before spending the summer of 1966, the World Cup winning year, of course, for England, working as a redcoat in Butlins holiday camp at Mosney, County Meath, followed by
Yes.
2 more summers at the Butlins holiday camp in Clacton. I mean, what was it like being a Butlins redcoat, Jim? Yeah, more importantly, what roles did you play at Butlins as a famous redcoat back in the day? It's a good
Well,
breeding ground, isn't it?
in my teens, as you say, the betting shop, I had sort of started to take an interest in showbiz, and I had my friends that I hung around with. You know, I kept telling them jokes, and they told me about would you believe, a PJ Proby lookalike contest, and they got me to enter it, and I sort of won a fiver on that. And then one particular friend, Fergus Woods, he said, "Why don't we do a mime act, because you were miming to the PJ Proby?" So he got one of these old Grundig tape recorders, and he put different snippets. He was very good at editing. Fergus Woods, he was called, and he put lots of pop stars like Mick Jagger, a little bit of Everly Brothers, a little bit of Freddie and the Dreamers. So I had this sort of mime act that we took round talent competitions, and then he went on to sing in a folk group. And then I had always sort of watched, as I say, the live shows, and then on television we had the great Ken Dodd and Markham and Wise and Tommy Cooper. So I wanted to then do a bit of an act. But that takes a while when you're a stand-up comic. But I used to do that in the evenings when I was working in the bet shop. But then my brother Brian, he came home from Butlins in Mosney. He'd been there on a holiday, and he said, "Look, Jim, I've seen in Butlins they have these hosts called Redcoats. I think it's right up your street, because they help people enjoy their holiday." Organizing dart competitions and snooker, and they do all these competitions, glamorous grannies, but they all have, at night, they perform in the bars. Some of them sing, some of them tell jokes. And he said, "I think this is ideal for you, because it'll give you that little experience." Of course, what I didn't realize, Russell, was Mosney is 26 miles from Dublin. And when you come from Belfast, we speak sort of a different type of Northern Ireland accents, slightly different. And of course, I talk very quick. And the people in the Southern Ireland really had a job making out what I was saying, actually.
Brilliant. Yeah.
It's a bit like a Geordie comedian coming down to London, I think. I think to make given a sort of analogy of it for any listeners over here and viewers for us. I think that's it. These are things you're not prepared for, actually. I would be more prepared for now, because I'm more a physical comedian. The character I developed, and I do a lot of physical comedy, would have been a lot better at the time. But of course, I hadn't got a style there. I hadn't got any originality. I just had a load of jokes that I went out and told. But I do feel that the Butlins, the redcoat job, in the 60s, especially when they all had big theatres, was a brilliant apprenticeship. And I had followed people like Dave Allen, Des O'Connor, Charlie Drake, Roy Hood, and they had all been redcoats. And it was I'm sure to a man, all the boys would say it was a wonderful job.
Oh, I can imagine. And of course, it wasn't just there, was it, as well? By the early 1970s, you'd left Belfast and you were living in Manchester. And from 1972, you also worked at Pontins holiday camps in Southport.
Yeah.
The Blue Coat.
Right. That was probably simply because there was 2 camps near. The first one I went to was in Ainsdale, which was in Liverpool. And then another one was in Morecambe, which was right near Manchester. So, and that's where I met my lovely wife.
Wonderful.
May. She'd come over from Ireland to work as a waitress with her sister, and then I was a blue coat there. The blue coat was it was pretty much like a red coat job. Yes. The only difference, I would say, with the Pontins was that was self-catering. One of the camps was self-catering, whereby you would cook your own meals in the chalet, whereby all the Butlins had 3 meals a day. You all went to a dining room. I suppose that would have been the only difference.
So Butlins would have been better, really, wouldn't it? You'd had more time to do what you were there for, which is entertaining people, rather.
Yeah, I expect. Well, we loved the big theatres. There were 3,000 seaters, and they were amazing, Russell. You know, because they all had an orchestra playing, and they had a different show every night. They would have review shows, And then one of the nights they'd have a camper's holiday camp. Anybody who was on holiday who could do anything, they would have a talent show. And if they won that week, they would come back at the end of the season and do a grand final. And then if they got through that, all the camps then, all the winners from all the camps would go, Billy Butland would hire out the London Palladium, and they would have this big, big talent show, and the Sunday people would sponsor it, and like it would be 6 or 7 grand then to the winner.
Wow.
So they were pretty much assured of a career in showbiz if they got that far, you know?
Absolutely. That sounds absolutely incredible and amazing for that time of life as well. It's quite big money, wasn't it? £7,000 as a winner. That's reasonable money going back
in those days, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Huge sum of money. But more than being a Pontin's blue coat, you spent 8 grueling years, and I say grueling in jest, performing on the North of England club circuit. I mean, how grueling was your apprenticeship, Jimmy, in the Northern England clubs? I mean, one of your quotes in the Lancashire Evening Post stated it was a tough, bruising apprenticeship. So please tell us more. How bruising was it, Jimmy?
Well, you know, obviously they could be discerning, and I think the fact that there was drink involved, it wasn't like a theatre. So obviously, for a comedian, if you were on too late, then they'd be a little bit drunk and they wouldn't get what you said. So I think it was always important to be on at a good time in the clubs. But you know, I find when you got a style and you worked hard, they embraced you. Then they would say, they'd say, you're too good for a Wednesday. Come back on a Saturday. It's things like that, you know.
Yes.
It was worth it to do it. They had different areas had different things. In Manchester, they just wanted one spot, and then you could drive to another club. So you would do 2 clubs a night doing one spot. But if you went up to the Northeast, you did 2 spots in the one club.
Yes.
And if you didn't really do well the first one, they would say, well, no, and they'd give you half the money. And say, well, you just, and that was it. So, and there used to be digs up there called pro digs, where all the artists, we'd all meet and have a bit of fun together. But you'd always know the comedian, if he was paid off on the one after one spot, he'd be the first one at the digs. So comedians used to drive around a bit. They didn't want to get in too early because you didn't want to know that you'd been paid up for the night.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. That's quite a classic thing, really, isn't it? Oh, wonderful. Yeah. And of course, being a comedian, you obviously adopted that way as well. So wonderful, really. Yes. It's a good story. Yeah. I mean,
sorry to interrupt you, Russell.
Are you okay?
I think you're ready for television because you've done that. I think if I were to skip that, I wouldn't have been the actor I am, and I wouldn't have had the character development. It's a bit like, I don't know, conscription or doing 2 years in the army. Yes. I think everybody that says that they've done that combat a better person, and I think for all how tough in the club were, they got easier it made you work hard on your craft, and it got easier as you carried on. So I honestly, I think it was although tough, but well worth doing, well worth a better act because of it, really.
Yes, I'm sure it was. It was obviously a good apprenticeship. And of course, your comedy style and humour is entirely clean, which is fantastic. I actually welcome that, to hear that. It's brilliant. And a popular theme of your comedy, of course, is Irish logic and the ubiquitous letter from your mummy.
Yes.
You almost always appear in your trademark outfit of cut-off evening trousers, evening tailcoat, hat, which I understand was given to you by the BBC to wear on the good old days, which we'll come on to a bit later on.
Right.
And your trademark Wellington boots, marked L and R for left and right, but of course worn on the wrong feet. I mean, where did the inspiration come from, Jimmy, to create this remarkable style, character, and humour? Because you were unique, weren't you? Absolutely brilliant.
Right. Well, what that came about again in the clubs because it was, you wanted to get a laugh as quickly as you could, Russell. Yes. And I found what we did then, pretty much we dressed the same as the singers. We all had sort of bow ties and suits. And I thought, what I'll do, if you can catch them by a little bit of a dance on or a jig and we're, that visual thing, then it makes it a lot easier to get them, because you look more like a singer when you come on. If you were dressed normally like a singer, then it didn't separate you. So in a way, I took a leaf out of the variety days and the music hall days. Well, comics wore the funny hats. It was established you're going to do an act. Yes. In Twice Nightly Variety, you only had 8 minutes. So the comic was a comic, the singer was a singer. Where at the time there was a lot of overlap. A singer would tell maybe a few jokes in between a song, but if it didn't go well, he had another song up his sleeve. They were sort of fair weather, but I set my stall out that, bang, 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 get that laugh at the first thing. And it seemed to go with the character. You always watch other people, Russell. And I remember when I was a redcoat in Clacton and Butlins, I went to the local theatre in Clacton, the Ocean Theatre, which was on the pier. There was actually an Ocean Theatre there. It isn't there now. There's a Westcliff Theatre still there now, but the Ocean. And there was a country yokel from Dorset called Billy Burden. And Billy had this floppy hat like the Wurzels. and he was like a country farmer. And he used to have this droll Dorset accent. And he'd say things like, "A lady said to me, 'Who are you?' And I said, 'I'm a son of toil.' She said, 'You look more like a ton of soil.'" It was, I thought, that's great. It suits his style, the garb. And I thought, yes, I like that. So I'm going to get, the comedy it helps me if I'm doing things like, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the police stopped me tonight in the car, and he said you were speeding," and I said, "So were you. You overtook me." And then, of course, once you do the first joke, you'd say, "And there's more." He said, "You were doing 80 miles an hour." I said, "I've only been in the car 20 minutes. So it was the logic of, yes. And then I would always have a payoff because he'd say, "Show me your license." And I showed it to him. He said, "This is a dog license." I said, "Well, I'm driving a Rover." Well, now, they sort of then, they know that's a joke at the end. Yes. But up until then, it could have been happening to me and things,
Yeah. Well, it's good actually that even in, sort of real life and stuff, you can bring your comedy show act out and have some fun with these instances. That's really quite brilliant, isn't it? And of course, you're developing your style, which is fantastic. I mean, your unique style and talent as a comedian was, of course, being noticed too. And you entered London Weekend Television's talent contest, Search for a Star. Yeah. And winning one of the programme's heats in 1980 that put you in the national spotlight. Quite realistically, it did. And of course, eventually winning the overall Search for a Star show. I mean, this was your big breakthrough into show business, Jimmy, breaking into television in the 1980s, particularly when glamorous and dazzling variety shows dominated the schedules. A very special moment in your life, Jimmy. It couldn't be a better time, could you? Very special.
Yeah. And the beauty about it too, Russell, was London Weekend sent a casting director out to the clubs and the holiday camps, and he saw me in Pottins after I'd been doing it for about 7 or 8 years, about 8 years. So I was sort of ready then. Before that, I'd gone and done auditions for other talent shows like Opportunity Knocks, New Faces, but I just wasn't ready. And of course, the other thing about that is you're in a cold room where they hold auditions were usually in like rehearsal rooms or places, and the only audience you have if you're a comedian are the other acts.
Yes.
So I always think that it's tough to do auditions, but I think when you see a comedian and he's doing well, you get a better assessment if he has an audience. Definitely. And that's where I was blessed then. A guy called Bill Heddersley came to see me. What had happened when you're a bluecoat, for instance, you dream about the cabaret, the visiting cabaret, and some of them had been bluecoats. Stu Francis, for instance, you may have heard of the great Stu. He lives not far in Bolton, and Stu was a lovely comedian who went on to be in Cracker Jack children's television. but Stu had been a blue coat and he'd learned to straight, and then he came back to the camp to be a visiting cabaret, and that was my dream. I want to come back and do the Ponton circuit, and I did the Southern circuit, and there was there was 6 camps down in Devon. There was 2 round Weston-super-Mare and 2 in Weymouth. I mean, 10 shows a week I would do and still have the weekend off. And we used to pitch up in Torquay, and the children were small, and so we did that. But by that time, during the Ponton holiday camps, visiting the cabaret was great, because the bluecoats would come up, because that was the knack. They were wanted to be like you when you were, and you'd been a bluecoat like them. So you used to give them advice. And one of the bluecoats that used to come up to me was Brian Conley.
Oh, wow.
Brian was an actual blue coat when I was doing the cabaret. And another one was Shane Ritchie.
Oh,
so
Shane
they
Ritchie.
actually were following. I was following the Des O'Connors and the Dave Allens and the Roy Hudds, and they were following the Jimmy Crickets. It's
incestuous, isn't it? Oh, wow. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic.
The thing about it, I want to be a little point I should, just to break off, because this is an interesting thing. I was thinking about this the other day. Like when I went to be a red coat at Butlins, there was a sign up backstage in the theatre, and it used to say blue material. It said, children don't understand it, parents don't like it, and we don't want it. So they actually had, that was written in big blazing letters.
Yes.
So that was the stall that Billy Butlin had put out. You had to be family clean then. And so that was our gauge, our landmark, you know, and how things have changed, obviously.
Oh, have they?
We won't suppose get into that, but there was this moral compass then, which I think was wonderful for any new entertainers and new comedians. It means you had to follow that, really.
Indeed.
So that was, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned there Crackerjack as well. I mean, that always takes me back a little bit. And I always remember it because it always went, it's Friday, it's 5 o'clock, it's Crackerjack.
Yeah.
You know, that's my little bit of comedy on your show, Jimmy. There we are.
Yeah.
Not stealing your thunder,
Eamon Andrews was the first one. The great Eamon Andrews was the first one. And then Leslie Crowther.
Yes.
I got to know Leslie. Don McLean is still a big friend. And Don was one. And Bernie Clifton's a massive friend, and they all were the resident comedians on Crackerjack at different times, you know.
Brilliant program, really was. And I also believe you were inspired by your old mentor at Butlins, Bill Martin, who was surprisingly working as an audience warm-up artist on the Search for a Star show.
Yeah.
Very small world indeed, Jimmy, isn't it? I mean, tell us a bit about Bill Martin and how you worked together, because he was part of your apprenticeship, wasn't he? He helped you along at Butlins.
Yes, it was a dream to come true to meet Bill. He was my mentor. As I say, I started off in the Mosney one, and I managed to get to grips with the different. I slowed up, and I got some visual humor, and that was it. So I got transferred over to Clacton, and Bill Martin had the experience of working in twice nightly variety. So he'd been a stand-up comedian. He did an act with his brother and another guy. Now, his brother, listeners and viewers will have remembered from the great Basil Brush. He wrote the scripts for Basil Brush, George Martin.
Wow.
Basil Brush made its first appearance on a David Nixon show. It all sort of comes together. It fits like a jigsaw puzzle, because George then wrote for David, then he wrote for Basil Brush. And the lady who went on to manage me, she actually managed David Nixon. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
It's okay.
Yeah, this is just to give you an idea that the pedigree of Bill Martin, having a brother like George, who originally was called the casual comedian, but he went on to script writing. So there was Bill. He was the entertainment manager. All the theaters were closing in the mid-50s. So he gets this job at Butlins as an entertainment manager, but he's taking all this wonderful knowledge from being a comedian. And I couldn't believe it, Russell. He played the piano, he played guitar.
Wow.
When we do music hall chairman, he would be the chairman of the music hall. And he was just wonderful. It was and the knowledge. So
Yes.
he used to put me in the red coat show, and he'd say, "Do this now, do that, just project a bit more, and work on character comedy." And to have a season with him, I was blessed. And of course, as I say in the autobiography, you notice I'm getting a little plug there.
Yes, you can plug as much as you like.
Yeah, that later on, it was like a Charles Dickens novel. When I got on the talent show, Search for a Star, and I went down to London on the train, and when I came out of the dressing room, who was standing there with a clipperboard was Bill Martin. He was the actual warm-up on the show. So he said to me, "Jimmy, what are you doing here?" And I says, "Well, I'm on the show, Bill." He said, "Well, where's your name?" Because my real name is Jimmy Mulgrew, you see.
That's right.
He said, "I can't see Jimmy." I said, "Well, Bill," I still called him Mr. Martin, I think, actually. I said, "Mr. Martin, I changed my name when I did the clubs to Jimmy Cricket."
Yeah.
Oh, he said, "I thought that was a funny name when I saw it on the clipboard." So we chatted, put the word to right. But it really relaxed me, reliving the old times in the corridor for when we did that show that night. And then, as you rightly say, when I was lucky enough to carve a career in television and get my own series. By that time, he'd left Butlins, and obviously he was doing the warm-up for the Search for a Star, but he actually came on to one of the series I did on television, and he actually was warm-up. So it was like it was just a lovely...
Yeah.
Those things in life, you know, they're quite magical when they happen, aren't they?
They are, and sometimes they happen because they're meant to happen as well, aren't they? He was still there.
Well, I suppose I believe that.
Helping you through.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes,
I have the same beliefs as well, Jimmy. So what goes around comes around, and all these good things.
Yeah. And there's certain times when your prayers get answered, you think, "Oh, it's going to be tough, but take me through a lot," and then you get that.
You do, and you were later given your own 4-part comedy series on Central Television in the mid-1980s, and called "And There's More," of course, which of course is named after one of your famous catchphrases. I mean, which included the first TV appearance by the impressionist Rory Bremner. So please tell us more about your very own TV comedy show, because it sounds amazing. I'm sure I watched it a few times on the show.
Well, what had happened, Russell? I'd started to pop up doing guest spots. And I did one on the Des O'Connor show, and out of my manager at the time, Phyllis Rant, says, "Thames want you to do a pilot for your own television," which was quite exciting. So I did that, and I'd always loved Eddie Brabham, the comedy writer, who a lot of people will know. They'll know that he was the great Morecambe and Wise. Wrote the Christmas shows, but they may not know that he wrote for 10 years for Ken Dodd. Eddie was wonderful. But I was when you're carving a career, you look out for writers, and you're always looking for things to help you, because television obviously absorbs so much material. You have your cabaret act, but once you get on telly, it's a different ball game. You've got to keep coming up with stuff. And I noticed that Eddie was still because he'd moved to Thames with Morecambe and Wise, and Eric sadly had passed away, that Eddie was still under contract. And so we met up he lived in Liverpool. So he wrote the pilot. Thames, and you have to understand that they decided not to run with the pilot, and that's their choice, their prerogative. But we had the actual pilot. My agent, very astute, Phyllis Rance, she said, "Look, why don't we send the pilot?" Yeah, what had happened then, Sue Pollard was going to do a show for Central, and I think something happened. So by that time, the jigsaw puzzle was starting to fit again. Bill Heddersley, who discovered me and gave me the break on Search for a Star at London Weekend, was now working for Central. He rang Phyllis up, and Phyllis said, "Well, Jimmy's just done a pilot. 6 months ago, he did a pilot for Thames. We'll let you have a look at it." And he said, "Yes, and I can show it to my boss, John Schofield," because he was the head of that light entertainment for Central. They were based then. They used to be at Elstree when Sir Lou Grade was with them, but they'd got a franchise because they had supply for the East Midlands as well as the West Midlands. So they were based in Nottingham. So we sent the pilot, and then Bill said, yes, John Scofield wants to run with it. So that's how we got the series in Central.
Wow.
Now, John Scofield wanted it to be a gang type show, and he wanted to call it on this more. And I bought into both those things. I mean, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't, indeed, Jimmy? Eh? Who wouldn't? It's your brand, haven't you know?
Yeah, exactly. Now, while even as we sort of were getting together at the rehearsals, the producer Tony Wolfe and his associate Paula Byrne, they said, we've seen this great, fabulous impressionist, and we'd like to have him in one of the team. They already had a girl called Jessica Martin, who was a brilliant impressionist, and obviously I said, go for it, and that was the main team. The only other person was Adrian Walsh, who was from my hometown in Northern Ireland. Well, he was from Bangor, which is just outside Belfast, but he came on board because his agent had been talking to Tony Wolfe and said, well, we can help write as well and help the scripts, because Eddie didn't come with me. Eddie Brim was still under contract in Thames, so we had to depend on material coming in from all sorts, unsolicited stuff. Everybody, there was a script associate called Trevor McCallum, but basically his job was to sift through the material that was coming from all different writers. Yes. So Adrian was great. He was the extra one there. It was amazing to have Rory. The thing about Rory is, in the interim, while we were recording the series and before it went out, he managed to get on the Terry Wogan show when Terry had his tea time program. So he made a huge impression there. So he wasn't totally unknown to the viewers by the time our series had come out that summer, because Terry had used him. But it was wonderful. We did some lovely sketches together. We did this one where Rory played a Scottish doctor, and I was suffering from a narcolepsy, and I'd say, doctor, and I'd be asleep. Excuse me. So they're always lovely to look back on those, because in a way, Russell, we're from diametrically opposed backgrounds.
Yes, of course.
I mean, here's me, a working class guy from Belfast. Rory came up through Cambridge, the footlights. He became on to become a massive star in Channel 4 with his own satire series. But, I think comedy is like music. It just brings us all together.
It does.
It does indeed. And I would laugh at Rory. And it was wonderful. He did one good thing. He actually had a writer. He was able to bring a writer on himself to help him with scripts. And I thought that was a good move. That was a very good move. And Tony Wolfe, the producer, bought into that. And it meant he could, get a few of his sketches that he wanted in, which is nice as well.
Absolutely. And he quite rightly said there, I mean, laughter, let's be honest, is one of the most beautiful natural cures for all sorts of problems, mental health and otherwise. I mean, laughter, it's just a wonderful natural thing, isn't it? And to bring laughter into people's homes.
There's no question about it. I mean, yes. It's such a tonic.
Without doubt.
Well, people come up to me after shows when I do my live show, and they'll say, like, I lost, a loved one, and you can nearly have you in tears. But to think you've actually cheered them. They said we haven't laughed for a while.
Yeah.
We haven't come out even, and I just think, that's worth every. Just
Absolutely.
worth it.
It just means you're giving something back to people, helping people through their lives. Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, you also had your own radio series for BBC Radio 2 called, and not surprisingly, Jimmy's Cricket Team, written by the guy that we just talked about, Eddie Brabham again, multi-talented Eddie Brabham, and starring Peter Goodright, Bill Pertwee and Noreen Kershaw. I mean, this show must have been a whole lot of fun, Jimmy. Laughter all the way, I'm sure.
It was.
Dear.
And of course, the lovely thing about radio is you read the scripts, so there's no concern about forgetting your words.
That's true. That's true.
and we used to meet up at 2 o'clock, go through the scripts, have our tea, and then do the shows that night. Now, the first series was recorded at the City Varieties, the theatre, but then the producer, Mike Craig, he lived in Altrincham, and he said there was a lovely little theatre called the Club Theatre, only held 120 people, and we did the rest of them, the rest of the series. I think we did 5 all told. But what we do is, as I say, we go through 2 shows in the day, read through, and then when the audience come in, we'd have our tea, then the audience come in. And that happened over 4 days, and we had 8 shows. And they used to go out on a Thursday evening on Radio 2 and on a Saturday at 1 o'clock as well. And it was to be surrounded by people like Bill Pertwee and Peter Goodright and Noreen Kershaw, actors and who could. It was just lovely. And Mike Craig was he'd been a writer himself. He wrote with 2 other fellas, Laurie Kinsey and Ron McDonald, through the 70s. They wrote for Roy Castle and Des O'Connor and all that. So the pedigree with Mike was wonderful. And it was a beautiful, to be part of it, Russell, was lovely,
I could only imagine, actually, Jimmy. And of course, now this next part does take me back a little bit as well, to be honest. You featured on numerous occasions on the BBC's long-running TV show, The Good Old Days. I mean, I do remember The Good Old Days, and clearly a show you liked to perform on. That was a cracking show, wasn't it, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw it when I was small, growing up in Belfast.
Yes.
And when I got before I actually went on the search for a star, I actually wrote to the producer, Barney Colahan, and I told him that I'd love to do the show. What had been happening there, Barney had actually got another talent show running on BBC simultaneously, A Search for a Star, called Rising Stars. Would you believe? So when I wrote to him and said, I'm coming up on this thing and I'd love to be on Good Old Days, and I says, I know it's in competition with Rising Stars. I said, but what would Marks and Spencer's be without little Al? I said, it's all fair competition. I said, and he was nice. He was very nice, Russell. He wrote back and he said, yes, he said, I enjoyed your spot on Search for Star for London Weekend, but we're booked up, Jimmy, for the series. So, and I thought, oh, that's it. It was nice to get a return. He said, I'll think about you for the future. And I thought, well, give me a bit of hope. And sure enough, I got the Christmas one, would you believe? And it went out on the Sunday before Christmas. And to be honest with you, it probably was an even better break than the Search for the Star one, because you can't fail to go well in that. The whole atmosphere. Barney Colahan had this great idea to get the audience dressed up in Edwardian costume as well as the performer. And some of these costumes, and as you could see, the camera swung round to them, and there were always. The other great thing he did was all the people round the front who were dressed up were from local amateur dramatics and musical societies, and they're quite outgoing to begin with.
Yes.
So they would used to laugh raucously and applaud and cheer. But wasn't that a clever idea?
Oh, very clever. Brilliant.
To actually
Genius.
They're more extroverted, really, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. Jimmy. It's an amazing idea. Absolute genius, really, when you think about it.
You think of it, yeah.
I mean, you also featured in the Crankies Club as well, alongside the Crankies, of course, and Bobby Davro. I mean, what a bundle of laughs this must have been. Bobby Davro, what a great comedian he is.
He is, and he's still going strong. He's just such a very brilliant impressionist, and because with Bobby, it's not just he has that little exaggerated bit that can give you the belly laugh when he does impressions.
Yes,
he can just find that little bit from one of his characters that he does. It's very. I remember Paul Gascoigne. He's just wonderful, Paul Gascoigne.
Yes, he is.
Alex Hurricane Higgins. He used to get the thing on them. With the Crankies and Jeanette, I actually did a pantomime with them as well up in Glasgow. And to be up there in Glasgow, where they're originally from, we did 10 weeks in a pantomime. It wasn't really your more traditional pantomime like Cinderella or Aladdin. It was actually Pinocchio. So it was more a sort of a play at Christmas time.
Yes.
But we did 10 weeks up in Glasgow, and the place was full to the rafters. And that's how they'd met, you see. They'd worked in the Glasgow Pavilion. Little Jeanette, who played Jimmy Cranky, she'd been in review in shows in the past. And Ian had been an electrician at the Pavilion. So they met and fell in love and then worked out an act together. And they were lovely. I still hear from them time to time. They're sort of retired now, Russell, because people ask me about the Crankies.
Yes.
They live down in Torquay. They've got a beautiful house, but they actually go, they became very popular in Australia. They used to go out and work Australia. So they go in during our winter, off they go, and they have this wonderful house in Bondi Beach.
Oh, Bondi Beach, very wise, great place to be.
Yeah, which is, and then they come back obviously to live in Turkey. But yeah, they were certainly they were very unique and original act, and I always got on well with them.
They certainly were. I mean, there's a little bit of a plug for me here as well, I suppose. I'd love to get Bobby Davro on this show, Jimmy, but maybe you can help me do that, because I think he'd be brilliant as well on this show, Bobby.
Well, I certainly would. Yeah, well, I can. Yeah, that would be. I think he got in touch with me not so long ago about doing a charity show, which I couldn't do. But he knows my son-in-law. My son-in-law does the more modern comics.
Oh, okay.
Because my daughter, Katie, she does the comedy clubs. She's married to Lee, and Lee manages some of the acts that have been on Britain's Got Talent and that. And I think he's done some stuff with Bobby. So we can mention it to him. It does no harm.
It does no harm at all. I mean, it'd be great to get him on, because he's a great impressionist and a decent chap as well. So yeah, I often want. Well,
he can. The great thing about it is, because he's an extrovert, he can do an impression at the drop of a hat.
He can.
Rory, I used to love Rory doing that. Rory used to not only a great impressionist, but he would do impressions of our producer on the series.
Oh, wow.
Like Tony Will. And of course, you'd be having a cup of tea and he'd go in and you'd be falling about. I used to love all that. He was just a natural mimic, you see,
Yes. Oh, that's quite brilliant. And if we get him on, we could actually get him to mimic yourself, Jimmy, as well, couldn't we, really? Do a bit of a Jimmy Cricket mimic. Why not? Oh, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you also appeared on Bullseye in 1984, which was a bit of a surprise to me when I saw this. And, Bullseye was a very popular darts-themed television show presented by the great Jim Bowen, of course, and starring Tony Green, and always featured a top world darts star at the time. Now, I'm quite big in darts. I do a lot with all the darts players. But on this occasion, it featured your good self, Jimmy, and you scored 125 with 9 darts for charity. You then told Tony Green at the Ocky that he forgot to add 60. So Tony said, yeah, he forgot to add 60 to your score, giving you 185, which meant, of course, the chosen charity received £185. I mean, you're a genius, Jimmy, and what a fun show to appear on. I mean, to turn around and do that and get another £60 out of the show for the charity. It was brilliant, wasn't it? Fun show.
Yeah, well, I was a very fun, but Jim obviously was a very good stand-up comedian.
He was.
And I missed the comedians. I just came after that, but I got to know him through working around the northern clubs. He was very popular there, and it was great to see him get that break. I always remember when he came, he drove over to Rochdale to see me. He was on his way down to London, I think, and he had this beautiful house that was used to be a railway station in Carnforth.
Oh, wow.
And it used to be the scene of the famous black and white movie called Brief Encounter.
Right.
With Trevor Howard. Oh. And it was the sort of set for that. But Jim had the house. It had become disused by them. And Jim had his house where the station was. Because I always have a vivid memory when he was on This Is Your Life, that Eamon used to take the train up and get off and come off with a red book. So he stopped off, and he was the first person, Russell, I ever saw that had a mobile phone.
Really?
Yeah, it was the big. I don't know if you remember when they were
all like bricks.
Yeah, that's it. And I said, Jim, what's that? He said, it's a mobile phone. What? I said, you don't plug it in and you don't do that. And I was fascinated by it. So that's, and then we talked about the show, and of course, going on it now. I hardly played darts before. I mean, if my memory serves me right, I think the cameraman ducked when I threw a dart. So they were very, very. I think it was sheer luck, to be honest, that I got. But you're always glad you can make a few bob for charity.
Of course,
you know. So it's nice.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that part of your life a little bit later on, because that's quite amazing as well. I mean, I can remember years ago, I met Anton Deck in a pub in London. And I then had one of the first mobile phones with a camera on board. It must have been about 1989. So I met him in this pub. It was the Rose and Crown in London, south of the river, just by the London Weekend Television Studios. They'd obviously been in there doing their show. And I went up to him and said hello, and we had a good old chat. I said, look, let's get a picture. Well, have you got a camera? I said, no, I've got a camera on my mobile phone. What, mobile phone with a camera? I said, yes.
Really?
Yeah. About 2 weeks later, they had their show on the Saturday evening, and they said, oh, we met this guy in a pub the other week. He had a camera on his mobile phone.
Really? That's a lovely story.
Great story, isn't it?
That's a lovely story. Yeah.
And I bet Anton Deck will still remember that today, you know, because it was an unusual sort of moment in life, really. Fascinating.
You were an innovator, Russell.
Innovator.
Yes,
pure innovation.
You were ahead of your time.
Oh, dear. Don't say that. All the risks. Yeah, take all the risks. Then in 1987, I mean, we just talked about this briefly, you were subject of This Is Your Life when you were surprised by Eamon Andrews in Central London. And sadly, the last regular edition of the programme to be broadcast with Eamon Andrews as presenter. That must have been a huge shock, Jimmy, but at the same time, hugely exciting, rewarding, and very satisfying. I mean, how did you feel at the time when Eamon Andrews approached you with the famous Red Book? And in this moment, your Red Book, Jimmy, of course, all your friends and relatives would have been there, and fascinating. Yeah. That must have been a real thing.
Well, just to set it up a wee bit, was if we go back to the Pontons days when I was a blue coat,
yes,
and I met my wife, May. She'd come over from Belfast to work in the Pontons holiday camp as waitresses with her two sisters, Margaret and Evelyn. Now, when they'd waited on their tables, they used to go into the bar at night, the Sundowner bar, and the group that were there were the nobodies, and they used to say, does anybody want to get up and sing a song? And Margaret and May, that my fiance at the time, they'd learned harmony. So they used to get up and they used to do like Buddy Holly, there you go, and baby, a little bit of Simon Garfunkel, yes. Slow down, you move. And they just, they blew everybody away. Both there was staff members and the holiday makers. And then I hatched a plan. I'd fallen in love with my wife, and I thought, what we'll do when the season ends, we'll go to Manchester to break into the clubs, but I know the girls will get work right away.
Yes.
I might struggle, but they'll get work right away. But we didn't have a car. We didn't, you know, a friend, one of the waiters who was at the camp, his sister put us up while we had day jobs and things, and we used to go out there. But we needed to buy a car, a banger of a car. And the only one who could drive the car was the older sister, Evelyn. But it kept breaking down. And I'll probably break off and tell you a little story here. It broke down once on our way back from a club, and we were pushing it, literally pushing it up a hill, when a police car came along. The two policemen come out, and they start to push with us. They start.
What story?
Right. And would you believe, the sweat started to run on me because we didn't have any tax, insurance.
So what a story.
Yeah, when we got to the top of the hill, then obviously we all jumped in. Evelyn was still on the steering wheel, and the policeman waved us off, blissfully unaware.
Wow, what a story.
it was like a scene from a leading comedy, to be honest with
Oh,
you. It would be
definitely.
unthinkable now because we don't have computers, the police, and they
Exactly.
know exactly, your registration number. Anyway, to get to the This Is Your Life. So Evelyn then, because then I was engaged to May, and Margaret had met a school teacher from Leeds. He was learning to be a school teacher. He since became one, and they fell in love. So Evelyn she was at a crossroads. She never found a partner at the holiday camp. So she decided to emigrate to Australia, right? And it was the best move she made. She met and fell in love with a nice guy called Barry, and they had 6 beautiful children. And then 14 years later, I came up to Manchester under the pretext of the next morning, my agent had invited me up to go to a show at the West End. And then she said, the next morning, you'll stay in a hotel, Jimmy, and then we'll drive to a building site where we'll have photographs to publicize your book, Letters from Your Mammy, you see?
Yes.
So I'd gone up, I came out of the train came down from Manchester, arrived at Euston, I got on the tube. The tube took me to Oxford Circus because my agent lived in Regent Street. Well, she lived, that was her office. And as I came out of Oxford Street tube station, who should I see in Oxford Street with her husband, Barry, but Evelyn? And she just put her finger to her lips and said, shh, don't tell May, but I'll be coming up to Rochdale in the next few days. So I was sworn to secrecy, right? So I get to my agent's office and I say, Phil, you've never believe who I've just seen in Oxford Street. It's 1,000,000 to 1 chance. But I met my wife's sister, right? So, unbeknown to me, my agent excused herself and rang up the research team at This Is Your Life. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know I was I was just sitting in the office. Anyway, we went to the show that night. It was actually about Groucho Marx. It was written by a son. It was a play. But the next morning, we were on our way to this building site, and in the distance, I could see this fella in a donkey jacket and a tin hat, carrying a red book. And as I get closer, beside him was Evelyn. And so as the car came in, and I got out. Who was it? Obviously, Eamon Andrews. And he said, Jimmy, last night you saw your sister-in-law. It was a big surprise for you, but I've got an even bigger one because today this is your life.
Oh,
and
brilliant.
Right. And Russell, they were going to cancel the show, because they thought that it was going to be, I still had the clue. How they switched it around was quite ingenious. On the car to get ready, because from the building site, then we headed to the Thames studio. In the car, I sat beside the floor manager, Brian Klein, he was called. He said, what we're going to do, Jimmy, when it gets to the part of the program when we talk about the Tweedy sisters, Eamon is going to say to you, now, Jimmy, we've got your wife here and her sister, Margaret, but wasn't there another sister called Evelyn there? And you come in and then you just explain, you set it up because your wife thought that Evelyn wouldn't be coming over because when the researchers talked to her, they said she was too ill to travel. Oh. So May didn't know Evelyn was there. So when Eamon set me up, I said, yes, Eamon, Evelyn was the other sister who drove us around the clubs. We thought she wasn't going to make it tonight, but she's flown all the way over. And as I said that, and Evelyn came through the door, well, of course, Margaret and May burst into tears because they didn't know she was coming. Wow, so we still got this surprise element,
That's incredible, isn't it? What an incredible moment.
It's one of the reasons, Russell, I think people still come up to me and talk because they can see it on YouTube now.
Yes.
And they say, what about that 1,000,000 to 1 chance you met your sister-in-law the night before the program?
Yes. I mean, it's a great story. It really is a great story. Well, what can you say? Just absolute brilliance, Jimmy.
Yes, it was a big shock. It's a sadder moment then when we found out about Eamon because he'd actually been watching that episode in his hospital bed.
Yeah.
And we'd grown up with him when he was a boxing commentator. Then he went on to do the sports news. He did the London. He was one of the first, wasn't he?
He was.
Tonight, live from London. The Eamon Andrews had all the Hollywood stars. He was
a brilliant character.
He is the story of original black and white television, really, isn't he?
Yes, definitely.
And I just felt a bond when I found out that he watched the episode I did. He recorded one, I think maybe two more that were in the can. But we were over in Cyprus on a holiday when we found out. We just couldn't believe.
No, it's a sad day.
There's some people always with you. You
Yes.
grew up with them, and you think they're immortal, really, don't you, Russell?
Do, yeah. No, I agree with you completely. And he was a lovely fella, wasn't he, Eamon? And forever may he rest in peace. Of course, it was a shock to a lot of people. I think, to be honest,
of course,
a shock to a lot of people. Real sad time.
Yeah.
And of course, you also toured in the UK with other artists such as the Osmonds, Brotherhood of Man, Jerry and the Pacemakers, starring in comedy theme shows with Cannon and Ball, the great Cannon and Ball. Wow. Paul Daniels, Frank Carson, and of course the Crankies. Some big, well-known names and groups here, Jimmy. Some might say you've had a star-studded, glittering career. And you have, haven't you, really?
Yeah, meeting and knowing the boys has just been amazing. I mean, with Frank Carson. Yes. He actually did a letter from his mummy in Ireland before I did. I have to own up. I'd seen another Irish comedian called Billy Stutt do it. It's famous from American vaudeville, the letter from the Irish mother. But Frank did it totally different. We did different gags. And he used to say to me when we toured, "Right, Jimmy, who's going to do the letter tonight? Let's toss up."
That sounds like Frank Carson as well.
Yeah, Frank would always do. His opening would always be, "Got a letter from my mother now. She said, 'Dear Frank, you've been away for 3 weeks now, and we thought you were locked in the toilet.'" Right. So where I would go, "Dear son, you won't recognize the house when you come home. We've moved." So we always had different things. I think, Russell, the thing about the letter from my perspective is you change with the changing styles. Now, what I would have done when I started off in the 70s, I am sending you 3 socks, son, since you've gone away to live in England, you've grown another foot. Right? Now I would do things like, "It was my birthday last Tuesday and the whole family bought me a flat screen television set. I don't like it, son. My ornaments keep slipping off the top." So, and then there'll be another one. "Your nephew Kieran has been arrested for picking blackberries. He was picking them at 2:00 in the morning in a shop that sold computers." So you're always, I mean, obviously people will say, "Jimmy, your mommy must be a good age."
Yes, indeed.
Well, I say, well, she's in her 90s,
Yes.
Because sometimes I'll do a phone call as well. Phone calls are probably a little bit different, original. I don't know anybody else. Obviously, I've just explained there's a few comics do the letter, but I don't know anybody that do a phone call. So sometimes in my live act and theatre act, I'll do a phone call to her as well. So I'll say things. "What's that, mommy? Last night you dreamt you were plucking a chicken. When you woke up, my dad was bald." Right. So I would do things like that.
Yes.
So that made a little bit different. But I always said to the audience, "Now she's in her 90s now, so I might have to call out loud. Go a bit slower on the phone," and that sets it up a bit, you see, as well.
It does, yeah. You've got to change your act sometimes. It's all good, isn't it? It's all good. Good original stuff, and working with that. That's brilliant, quite brilliant. Okay, well, you are brilliant comedians, no doubt about that, Jimmy. And of course, you're also one of a number of performers to appear in the video for the 2007 comic relief single, a cover of the Proclaimers song "I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles" by Matt Lucas as Andy Pipkin, and of course Peter Kay as Brian Potter. I mean, there seems to be no end to your extraordinary talent, does there, Jimmy? Really, you put your hand to most things. It's brilliant.
Well, I always think you're always developing, Russell.
Yes.
When I had I'd had a few agents when I was doing the clubs, And then I got the London. I was able to get a London agent, and that happened. She rang once, a lady called Phyllis from International Artists, and she said, "You're appearing with Tony Christie this week, and a gentleman called Ron, who's his road manager, he said he's recommended you because you do a clean act, and I managed Broadhall and Emu. Would you be available to do a show this Saturday with him?" Well, I was working, but I said, I would in the future, please come on. And then when I did my heat of Search for a Star, I won the heat. The phone rang 5 minutes after the program went down, and she had this wonderful accent, Phyllis. She'd been a she had been in the Second World War. She'd been promoted to captain.
Wow!
So she'd broken the glass ceiling. I mean,
definitely.
Privates had to, salute and things. She managed ENSA, the entertainment for the troops, even on D-Day. Apparently, she was actually driving the lorry with the entertainers. So she had this incredible career. And she'd gone on to manage Rod Hall and Emu and David Nixon and Ralph Harrett. Tony Hancock was her first act. So I was very lucky to have her.
Yes.
Right. Now, bring me back a bit, because I've gone off the thing a little bit. Just bring me, Russell, where we are. We're talking
about the Proclaimers song, I'm Going to Be 500 Miles, 2007 comic relief single.
Yes, that's right. You'd said that you've got to diversify. Yeah. Well, she'd always said, why don't you do some more comedy songs? Why don't you do that? But at the time, I wanted to do the gags. I want to do the one-liners.
Yes.
But I've since put comedy songs into my act. She's no longer with us, but I sort of think, Phyllis, you would have loved it now. What you were saying, you were probably right, but I didn't see it at the time. Yeah. And then because I'd learned to juggle when I was small, I brought that into my act. I learned the saxophone because I took my kids to learn clarinet lessons, and the guy taught me a bit. So I think when Charlie Parker will sleep in his bed at night. I'm not saying that, but if you can play enough and bring a bit of comedy in, it actually makes it different. It holds the retention, Russell,
It does. I quite agree with you. I quite agree indeed, Jimmy. Absolutely, it does. And then, in 2022, last year, you toured with Leah Bell in the Royal Knees Up show, in fact, for our now late Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. I mean, this must have given you a real sense of achievement, Jimmy, a true honour, and God bless her.
Yes. Leah Bell, the lady who put that show on. Leah is from up northeast, and she's had a great career in Clubland. She played Jersey 21 summer seasons, and it's one of those occasions, Russell, when you work with people in clubs and you think they are sensational and they're going to get on, and then they don't. And it's a sort of like a miscarriage of showbiz justice that they don't.
Yes.
Because they had all the talent. But Leah, all right, she didn't get the television breaks that she deserved, but she's always learned a great living. And now she's writing her own plays and taking them on the road. Brilliant. She's not let it sort of get her down or be pessimistic. It's so easy and say, get jealous. So why did they get on and I didn't? She's knuckled down and she's earned a great career. So I salute people like that.
Yeah, it's good character,
didn't get those breaks, but earned a great career. And if you see a play near and a theatre near where you are and Leah's in it, you're going to get a laugh. You're going to get a professional. And when she toured with that right on these up, she hired the dancers. She lives up in a place called Bedlington, up in the northeast. I think the nearest would be Newcastle, I think, to that. Anyway, and so she does the pantomime up there in her local theatre, Concert, I think it is. So she's utilized her talents. So she's not sat down and moaned. She's made the best of what she has, and God bless her.
Absolutely, and quite rightly so too. She stuck by it, showed a strength of character to carry on
the
and
resilience,
improve our act.
and
The
to know you have
resilience.
something and the people come out and
Indeed.
be able to earn a good living, you know.
Absolutely. They've got the natural talent, quite rightly so too.
Yeah.
I mean, like many of us as well, and this is including myself, Jim, as well. You wrote your autobiography, Memoirs of an Irish Comedian. Come here, there's more. We've got to get you to say that, haven't we? We've got to get you to say that. We should have done it at the beginning of the show. Because you wrote it during the COVID years, primarily, of course, to keep you active and sane, like I did probably. An important part of your autobiography was letting readers know the part that divine guidance and inspirational books played in helping you to overcome obstacles and setbacks. I mean, that's quite a story, Jim, isn't it? And you know, is there a particular story or moment in your autobiography you'd like to share with us? I mean, it's a crazy time, isn't it? COVID years.
There were a few. I suppose the main one was in the Redcoat days. I would just love being in the holiday camps, and then it would all grind to a halt. And then I'd be taking sort of different jobs, get frustrated, you know, about not being able to get an act together, and then you sort of wandering aimlessly. I used to go home to my, you know, my Mummy was still alive at the time. Obviously, I do the fictional letters in my act, but her and my sister were still. I used to go home for sanctuary and to relax, and they used to lend me money to get the boat back over to England again. You know, so it was a very what's the word? Uncharted. I didn't have a rudder, like a ship without a rudder, I suppose. But then once I'd started to get the books, and they were starting to make me think, and then I find my faith again, you know, my Roman Catholic faith, and I went into the one particular time I'd come across in the boat, and I went into a little chapel in Liverpool just to pray for my next. How do I, you know, get my life together and have a career in show business. And within a few days, I rang up to get another blue coat, see if I could get a job as a blue coat, one of the camps. And the guy came on, Jimmy Kennedy, and he said, yeah, go to Markham and you can help look after the children, be the children's uncle. And of course, by going there, I'd met my good lady. Now, I suppose so many people will say this, when they get the person who they fall in love with, they can channel them.
Yes.
You know, and that proved it with me, because when we went to do the clubs and the girls sang a bit, well, they did quite well, but my sister Margaret, her fiance at the time, wasn't really fussed with her in show business. He wanted her to, you know, settle down. So they went to Leeds. Now, my good lady said, well, that's fine. I'm going to get behind you and I'll take a job and you start rehearsing in the mornings, because this was the thing. You work in a factory through the day and you don't feel like going out to do a show or rehearsing or writing stuff. But my good lady, going to work in the potato crisp factory in Stockport in Manchester, I could get out of bed, try that, ring round, and that was a game changer, really.
Yeah, huge.
So I suppose that going into that chapel in Liverpool started a sequence of events that was to turn my life around, really, you know.
Absolutely, and quite right, sir. To have your good lady supporting you in that way is quite brilliant. Working as a partnership, absolutely fantastic, isn't it?
Well, Russell, would you believe yesterday we celebrated 49 years?
49 years! Wow, that's so next year's the big 50.
The big 50.
Oh, huge party time. I hope I'm invited, Jimmy. So yeah, what a huge party.
Sorry. It wasn't yesterday, it was Monday.
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 Well, this week anyway. That's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, and my son.
Congratulations.
Got tickets on Monday night. We went to see Shania Twain on our anniversary.
Wow, so what a fantastic show to go to as well. So next year, the big 50. I mean, what have you got planned? Is there anything?
Well, I suppose the family will do that. We haven't really sort of what I. It's one of those whereby, are they going to surprise me or should we do something?
Yeah,
it's one of those.
Let the family surprise you. That's
Yeah.
probably the best thing. And probably nothing will happen.
They made that surprise me. And then I could kick myself for saying I should have did something.
Yeah, exactly right, Jimmy. Yeah, you'll probably end up having nothing to do, and you think, oh no,
Nothing to do. Yeah.
oh dear, that'd be awful.
Cinderella on his 50th birthday.
Absolutely, yeah,
We'll
absolutely.
think we'll do something
I'm
because
sure you
there's
will.
a lovely lake around here called Hollyworth Lake, Russell, and you can just have a lovely walk and go and have fish and chips. It's the simple things in life, isn't it? Really.
Oh, some of the simple things in life are the best, aren't they? Really, they really are. I think the same. I really do. Then in September 2015, this is a real big thing that I found when I was researching you. It was announced that you'd been awarded a papal knighthood, Order of St. Gregory the Great, by Pope Francis, none other than, for your charity work. I mean, that is some award, Jimmy. I mean, please tell us more. And of course, what charities do you support? That's just incredible. The Pope? Pope Francis?
Right. Well, the autobiography, which you kindly mentioned,
yes.
Members of an Irish Comedian, when I sell it at my live gigs, they're a tenner, and a quid goes to Mary's Meals. And then when people buy them on Amazon, obviously they're a wee bit dearer, but it'll still be £1. Wherever they get it, £1 will always go to Mary's Meals.
Brilliant.
And Mary's Meals is it was founded by a gentleman up in Scotland, and it was inspired by the Virgin Mary, really. He used to go to Medjugorje, where there have been sightings of the Virgin Mary, and he's called Magnus, and he got together with some people, and at first he used to bring people over to Croatia when the war-torn countries and people were refugees and that. He would take lorry loads of stuff, and then he then realized about the crying need in countries. There were other countries where children were foraging food. They didn't even one decent meal. So he got together with some people, and what they did this ingenious thing. Onto the school, they would build a little canteen, and the mothers of the children would serve a thing called maize. Now, the maize would be grown in the field across the way by the husbands, the fathers. Wow. And this maize, if you just one plateful, has all these nutrients, vitamins. So if the child never had another meal, they would grow healthy. And then when they're at the school, they meet friends. And before they know it, they're learning. And as they learn and pass exams, they can then take care of their children. It's a sustainable model, which I think is amazing,
That is amazing. That is amazing. And I take my hat off to you, Jimmy. I really do. Because obviously your charity work is an amazing thing. And for it to be recognised by Pope Francis as well and to get a papal knighthood, that's just incredible, isn't it? Really incredible.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of some of the people like Sir Matt Busby and Bob Hope and what's Schlinder's List? What's his first name? Schlinder, the great guy that helped the Jewish people. Oscar Schindler. They did a movie. Steven Spielberg did the movie.
He did. Black and white movie.
And he helped to get the Jewish people and get them out and get them to freedom. So he was recognized as well. So when you're on illustrious, you never think. You think that you've loved what you're doing, you're putting something back. But I always think to accept it.
Of course.
If you may not think you've deserved it, but it's a lovely thing. I would never turn anything like that down. And of course, the other thing is, Russell, there always is champions to help you with this. There is a couple that live over in Liverpool called Bill and Sue Lees, and I was helping them. They were wonderful for charity. They were helping an Indian doctor. They were putting shows on for him so he could send money back to teach young student doctors how to get them through college. And so I did a few shows for them. So the next thing they do, they write to your local bishop, the diocese. People take the time. So there probably would be, I think, deserving causes, maybe more deserving, but they don't have people writing for them.
No, that's true. That's
very true. I wish there was more champions that when they see somebody do something, that they actually take the trouble and you know,
Promote it. Yeah, exactly right.
promote those people. Yeah,
Absolutely. It doesn't happen enough, does it, these days, to be fair? Probably never
I don't
has,
think.
but
No,
that's a shame.
no.
And of
Yeah.
course, after over 50 years as a comedy performer, you're still in great demand, performing to sell out theatre audiences and performing at corporate events throughout the country. You're still enjoying your life as a comedian, Jimmy, and entertaining the crowds. I guess you'll never retire, will you? You'll keep going. It's your
Well,
life.
there's no sell by date, is there?
There's
You
not.
know, I am such in awe of somebody like Bob Hope,
Mm.
who actually they start off in vaudeville, they go in to have their own radio series, they go into movies with themselves and with Bing Crosby. Then the next thing they have TV. He was doing TV specials up into his like 90s or something, and they
Yes.
lived to be 100. I mean, is that a life well lived?
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't get any better than that, does it, Russell?
It certainly doesn't. It's certainly a life well lived. And you only get one life, as we know, and you've got to live it, haven't you, really, and create those
Yeah.
moments and memories. And I know that when I wrote my autobiography called My Way, it brought back so much thoughts and processes about my life. It's a big book. That's amazing, you know, what you can think about and what you've done in life. And
exactly. And you were able to thank the people who helped you too.
correct.
Well, you were able to. I think your autobiography, really, in a way, it's a love letter to your family.
Yes. I did it really for myself. I did it just really to give my children and my grandchildren something to remember me by, really.
Exactly.
You know, that you don't just pass away and gone forever. You've got a book about you, and it's in the British Library.
Lovely. No,
that's
I think there's
that's
a
it,
book
isn't
in
it?
all of this.
Absolutely.
Even if it you don't, it may not be a bestseller.
Doesn't
but
matter.
your family have it. It's recorded. They can go and they can see what it was like and
Absolutely.
what you've done and
Absolutely.
things. Yeah. Oh no, it's
a wonderful thing to do.
yeah, and it gives you a chance to thank, as I say, thank people that helped you
does.
along the way. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I'm keeping an eye on time here because we're going over the hour now, big time, because this is a great chat. I'm really enjoying this, I have to say. But you've also been named as a new ambassador for the Blackburn Empire Theatre after supporting the venue for many years. In fact, during a question time, a question and answer session, I understand, with the audience at the theatre, you were asked to become the theatre's honorary patron, a true honour indeed, of course, Jenny, which you accepted immediately, saying, and I quote, "But it was a great honour, and I am proud to have been asked, and of course I accept. That is such a great little theatre, which means so much to the community. This theatre has got a great reputation among the artists who have performed here because everyone is so friendly." And you stated, Jimmy, "I always enjoy coming here, and it is a great honour to be asked to be patron." I mean, that's inspiring, isn't it? A true honour for you, really, the Blackburn Empire Theatre.
Yes, it is. What attracted me to the Empire was a guy called Mike Berry,
Yes.
sadly no longer with us.
Oh, sad.
But I wanted to, over the last 10 or 15 years, be creative, and I've always loved musicals. And my brother John had a pub in Belfast, and once I helped him out when I was a teenager, and once he pointed to the window and he said, "You see 2 streets down, Jim," he said, "is the last Irishman to win the Victoria Cross. He's called Jim McGuinness." And he aroused my interest. And then when I back to Frank Carson, Frank asked me to do a show for him in Blackpool.
Yes.
When I went into the dressing room, I saw this book, McGuinness VC. And I took down, didn't want to take Frank's, it was obviously Frank's,
Yes.
but I wrote down the publisher. It was a Dublin publisher, and I sent off for it. And it was a fascinating book. Jim McGuinness grew up in abject poverty, and at 15, he joined the Ganges. It was a big ship that was in dry dock near Ipswich. And when he was 20, when war started, he did some heroic acts. I think there was a sinking of an Italian ship, but him and other thing, even though they were then they're bringing out these Italian guys, it was lovely. But the big thing was, after the Second World War finished against the Nazis and the Americans were still fighting, he was seconded in a little midget submarine, and it was to blow up a ship called the Taka in
Yes.
Singapore to help the Americans get through. And he was amazing. He went down in the diving suit, planted limpets, got back up, but they were caught. They couldn't move. There was only 4 of them in the midget submarine. It was Jim, a cook, an engineer, and a captain. And so he had to go back down again and release the actual midget back to its ship. So he got the Victoria Cross. But in a way, Russell, his story really only begins there because obviously, you know, the local newspaper, the Belfast Telegraph, they had a collection for him. It was a big thing. He got caught then, and you know, when you come from home, the Northern Ireland, it's the sort of thing history has sort of left us geographically with we have each side Catholic and Protestant, and usually you've got the nationalists and the unionists. Yes. And Jim got caught in that thing. He was sort of a Catholic and a nationalist, and obviously the unionists had the upper hand with the thing. But and he finished. He couldn't get a job, and he pawned his Victoria Cross. Would you believe it? It was unthinkable.
Really? How sad.
Yeah, it was the saddest thing. But a Viscount won it back for him, bought it back for him. So it's a happy end. And he came over to live in Bradford. Towards the end of his life, he was fixing television set. I just thought it was just this wonderful story, and I wrote it. But I wrote it in song because I love to write songs. And Mike Berry, who I'd mentioned, I'm coming right. See the way I've come right back.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you swung that around nicely, actually, Jimmy. Yeah,
I told the whole story of a VC winner,
a Victoria Cross winner.
Mike, and I tried to get it on different theatres. Could you know put it on for me? And when I mentioned it to him at the Blackburn Empire, he looked at me and he said, "Is there any reason why we can't do it?" And once somebody says that to you, you're away. And I got it off the ground, and so that's always been sort of precious. Anybody that can take that, puts himself out on a limb and says, "Let's go for it." And so we actually got it. We got it off the ground. And the guy, it was based on the book, the fellow who wrote it, George Fleming, and Jim's son, who lived in Bradford at the time, he actually came to it. Now, but Mike Berry, now he's only recently died. It was just towards the end of last year.
That's sad.
Mike, we're going to do a big show in November.
Yes.
No, next month, October, which is coming up soon. And we're going to do a big show. Everybody who's ever worked the Blackburn Empire and all the local operatic societies that he's helped, the Gilbert O'Sullivan, we're going to do a special show in tribute to him. So fantastic. His name will live on. The golden legacy he's left with that theatre.
Absolutely, and well done. It really is a fantastic show to put on for such a great man, and I congratulate you for arranging that and being part of it, Jim. It's absolutely incredible. But you know, we must have been on for about an hour and 20 minutes now, and so you know, we do need to draw things to a close, I guess. So as always on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show, you know, we could talk forever, Jimmy, as your life in show business has provided so much laughter and enjoyment to so many people. So thank you, Jimmy, for coming onto the show. And
it's a real pleasure, Russell. Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Talking about your professional life on the stage, TV and radio, of course, as one of the UK's funniest comedians with an incredibly amusing and original act. If I may say so, slightly off-the-wall series of shows as well that only a genius like yourself could create. Really, I mean that. It's been a huge pleasure as always. And as always, the pleasure is all mine. And of course, the show's audience when this podcast is released on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show, either this evening or tomorrow morning. So all I can say is thank you, Jimmy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jimmy Cricket. An amazing. Clap our hands with
thank
joy.
You, Russell. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
You did your homework. It was amazing. You led the narrative, and you made it very easy.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased that's the case. You know, I have a certain way of doing the show. You know, there's always a start, a middle, and an end. Try and keep it professional. All about yourself and your professional life. It's brilliant. So thank you very much. Do stay on whilst I wrap up. It'd be good to have a quick chat with you afterwards, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, that's perfect. So there we are, Jimmy Cricket, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolutely amazing comedian and artiste we've had. A true British treasure, I have to say. The next episode on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show is The Voice of Darts, where my special guest will be Russ Bray, the professional darts referee who works for the Professional Darts Corporation, more fondly known as the PDC. He is also known as The Voice due to his unique style of calling and his shouty voice. That's quite literally broken speakers at events. This is true, I can tell you. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the inside. So until then, it's au revoir from him and au revoir from me.